The film ends with Carroll Shelby walking up a driveway, handing a wrench to a teenage boy, and driving away. The credits roll, Matt Damon disappears into Hollywood history, and the audience walks out of the theater thinking they understood the whole story. They didn't. Because the moment Ford versus Ferrari ends is the exact moment the real story begins. What happened to Mollie Miles, the woman who built an entire life around a man Ford never properly credited? What happened to Peter, the 15-year-old who watched his father die on a Tuesday afternoon in the California desert and carried that weight for the next 6 decades? Hollywood gave you the tragedy. Nobody bothered to tell you what came after it. Hi, my name is Johnny, and this is American Muscle. Who was Mollie Miles, really? Ford vs. Ferrari gives us Katrina Balfe playing Mollie Miles as a warm, grounded, quietly extraordinary woman who balances a husband who is equal parts genius and disaster. It's a good performance. It's a fair portrait. And it's still only about 30% of who Mollie Miles actually was. The film uses Mollie primarily as a narrative anchor. She's the person Ken comes home to. She's the person who tells him when he's being an idiot. She's the person in the kitchen making sandwiches while her husband argues with Carroll Shelby in the driveway, which, to be fair, probably happened. But reducing Mollie Miles to the sensible woman who kept the eccentric genius tethered to earth is a disservice to someone who was, by every account from people who actually knew her, a force of nature in her own right. Ken Miles did not marry a passive woman. He married someone who matched him. She had followed him from England to California in the early 1950s when the racing opportunities in America were better and the weather was considerably more forgiving. She built a life in North Hollywood while Ken ran his struggling garage, Competition Motors, which the film depicts accurately enough as a place that was perpetually 3 weeks away from financial collapse. She raised Peter largely on her own, during the periods when Ken was testing, racing, or being Ken, which by all accounts was a full-time occupation. What the film captures, and what deserves real credit, is the texture of their marriage. The way Mollie calls Ken out without cruelty. The way she supports the racing without pretending it isn't dangerous. The film shows her watching race coverage on television, tracking timing sheets, understanding exactly what her husband is doing out there. That's not artistic invention. That's who she was. She understood racing. She understood Ken. And when he died, she was the one who had to figure out what came next, alone, at a racetrack, with her teenage son standing next to her. The scene Hollywood invented, and what it reveals. Let's talk about the wrench scene, because it's important. At the end of Ford vs. Ferrari, Carroll Shelby drives to the Miles home and hands Peter a wrench. The implication is clear. This was Ken's wrench. This is his legacy. This is the closest thing to a blessing Shelby could offer a boy who had just lost his father. It's a beautiful scene. It's also complete fiction. It never happened. There was no wrench. Shelby did not drive to the Miles home and deliver a symbolic piece of Ken's toolbox to his grieving son. The scene was invented by screenwriters Jez Butterworth, John Henry Butterworth, and Jason Hall to give the film an emotionally satisfying conclusion. And here's the thing, I'm not even mad about it, because the scene reveals something true, even though the event itself is fabricated. What it tells you is that the filmmakers understood the central injustice of Ken Miles' story. He died without recognition. He died before anyone outside of racing circles understood what he had contributed. He died 2 months after having his greatest victory stripped from him by a technicality that benefited the corporation he had given everything to. And the people who loved him were left holding nothing but the memory of what should have been. The wrench is Hollywood saying, somebody should have given this family something. Somebody should have shown up. Somebody should have acknowledged what Ken Miles meant. The tragedy is that in real life, nobody did. Not with a wrench, not with anything equivalent. The Miles family was left to grieve privately, quietly, and largely without the public acknowledgement that the moment deserved. Ford had their 4 consecutive Le Mans victories to celebrate. The Miles family had a funeral in August of 1966 and a life to rebuild without the man at the center of it. Peter Miles, the boy, at Riverside. Peter Miles was 15 years old on August 17, 1966. He was at Riverside International Raceway that day with his mother. He watched his father make a series of trouble-free laps in the Ford J car, the experimental prototype with the bread loaf rear end that Ford's engineers were so excited about and that, as we now understand, was generating dangerous rear-end lift at race speeds. He watched his father come down the back straight at somewhere between 175 and 200 miles per hour, and then he watched the car go out of control, spin to the inside of the course, and go over an embankment. Ken Miles was ejected from the car. He died of head injuries before emergency crews reached him. The car caught fire. The evidence burned. Peter Miles was 15 years old. Think about what that actually means. Not as a plot point, not as the emotional gut punch at the end of a racing film. Think about what it means to be 15 years old and watch your father die doing the job that defined him on a racetrack on a Tuesday in the California heat. Peter Miles grew up. He became, by the accounts of people in the racing community who knew him, a private and quietly thoughtful man who carried his father's story carefully. He did not pursue a racing career himself. He did not become a fixture on the vintage racing circuit, signing autographs at events where his father's name was occasionally invoked. He stepped back from that world in a way that is entirely understandable and says everything about what Riverside cost him. He has not returned to Le Mans, not for the 40th anniversary of his father's victory, not for the 50th. The most famous endurance race in the world, the race where his father delivered one of the most dominant driving performances in motorsport history, remains a place Peter Miles has chosen not to go back to. And if you understand what Le Mans took from his family, you don't need to ask why. What Peter did do, quietly and consistently, was protect his father's reputation. He was involved in consultations for Ford versus Ferrari. He engaged with the filmmakers and with Christian Bale, whose preparation for the role reportedly included deep research into who Ken Miles actually was beneath the Hollywood archetype. Peter made sure, to whatever extent one family can influence a major studio production, that his father came across as a complete human being rather than a convenient symbol. He largely succeeded. Christian Bale's Ken Miles is not a perfect historical portrait, but he is recognizably a person. That matters. And part of the reason it matters is because a 15-year-old boy who grew into a man spent years making sure his father's story was told right. Mollie's letter, the most honest thing anyone said in 1966. In November of 1966, 3 months after Ken's death, Mollie Miles wrote a letter to Road and Track magazine. I want to spend some time with this letter because it is the most emotionally precise document that came out of the entire Ford versus Ferrari saga. More honest than anything Ford's PR department ever produced. More revealing than any of the corporate statements about Ken's contributions. More human than the film, for all its virtues, ever quite managed to be. She wrote, "Nothing could ever replace what I have lost. But the love and kindness showered upon me has been unbelievable. It has been a great life out here in California. Sometimes controversial, sometimes turbulent. But we have been happy." Read that again slowly. Sometimes controversial, sometimes turbulent. But we have been happy. That's not the statement of a racing widow performing grief for a magazine readership. That's a woman who understood exactly what her life had been and refused to reduce it to tragedy. She acknowledged the controversy. Ken's relationship with Ford was complicated. His relationship with race officials was occasionally combustible. The garage was always struggling. The racing was always dangerous. She knew all of this. She lived all of this. And her verdict on it, delivered 3 months after watching her husband's death reshape her entire existence, was that they had been happy. That sentence is an act of extraordinary courage. Because the easy thing to write in November of 1966 would have been something appropriately grief-stricken, something that positioned Mollie as the dignified widow of a racing hero, something that let Ford off the hook and let the racing community feel good about itself. Instead, she told the truth. It was controversial. It was turbulent. It was also, genuinely and completely, a happy life. And no technicality at Le Mans and no accident at Riverside could take that away from what they had built together. Mollie Miles lived for many years after Ken's death. She outlived Carroll Shelby. She saw her husband's name slowly begin to mean something to the world outside of racing circles. She saw Ford versus Ferrari get made. She saw Christian Bale win awards for playing the man she had followed from Birmingham to California and built a life with in a North Hollywood garage that was perpetually on the edge of bankruptcy. She did not get the wrench scene in real life, but she got something arguably more durable. She got to watch the world finally catch up to what she had always known about her husband. The recognition that took 35 years. Ken Miles was posthumously inducted into the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America in 2001. 35 years after Le Mans, 35 years after Riverside. Let that sit for a moment. The man Carroll Shelby called the backbone of Ford's entire Le Mans program. The man who won Daytona and Sebring and effectively won Le Mans in 1966. The man whose development work on the GT40 transformed a dangerous liability into a 4-time Le Mans winner, waited 35 years for official recognition from the institution that exists, specifically to honor people like him. By comparison, Dan Gurney, who led the 1966 Le Mans race before his engine failed, was inducted in 1990. Carroll Shelby was inducted in 1993. Bruce McLaren, who was declared the winner of the 1966 Le Mans by the technicality that denied Miles, was inducted in 2000. They all got there before Ken Miles did. The man who built the car, developed the car, nearly swept the entire endurance racing calendar in a single year, was 35th in line. Peter Miles attended the induction ceremony. He has spoken only sparingly about what that day meant to him, which is consistent with the private and careful way he has always navigated his father's legacy. But you don't need a quote to understand what it meant. 35 years is a long time to wait for the world to acknowledge that your father was extraordinary. The induction didn't fix the photo finish. It didn't change what happened at Riverside. It didn't give Peter Miles his father back, or give Mollie Miles the years that were taken from her. But it was the first time an official body looked at the full record of what Ken Miles had accomplished and said, yes, this man belongs among the greats. It was 35 years late, and it still counted. Ford versus Ferrari, 2019. What the film did for the family. Christian Bale has talked in interviews about the research he did for Ford versus Ferrari. He spoke with people who knew Ken Miles. He studied footage. He worked to understand not just the eccentricity and the hot temper that made for compelling cinema, but the deeper qualities underneath. The military background, the engineering instinct, the sardonic self-awareness. The man who described driving as his hobby the way other people described golf. Whether Bale spoke directly and at length with Peter Miles is not something that has been fully confirmed publicly. What is confirmed is that the Miles family was consulted during the film's development, and that Peter was aware of and engaged with the production. The film was released in November of 2019. It made over $225 million worldwide. It won 2 Academy Awards. And for the first time in over 50 years, Ken Miles became a name that people outside of vintage racing circles actually knew. That is not a small thing for a family that had spent decades watching the world overlook their father and husband. Every conversation about the film, every think piece about what really happened at Le Mans, every Reddit thread about whether Ford cheated Ken Miles, every person who watched it on a streaming service on a Sunday afternoon, and then spent an hour going down a research rabbit hole, all of it was a form of belated justice that no Hall of Fame induction and no corporate acknowledgement had ever quite delivered. The film is not perfect. It exaggerates Ken's temper for dramatic effect. It invents conflicts and compresses timelines and leaves out the full depth of who he was. Mollie Miles would probably have notes about Caitriona Balfe's portrayal because the real Mollie was sharper and funnier and more complicated than any 2-hour film could contain. And the wrench scene, beautiful as it is fiction. But Ford versus Ferrari did the one thing that mattered most to the Miles family. It made sure that when people heard the name Ken Miles, they felt something. Not just a footnote in a racing history book, not just a technical note about the 1966 Le Mans results. A person, a husband, a father, a man who was funny and brilliant and difficult and completely irreplaceable, who died doing a job that needed doing for a company that never quite gave him what he deserved. That's worth something, even if it took 53 years to arrive. The Triple Crown, the record that still belongs to his ghost. Here is where I want to leave you, because this is the detail that I think about more than any other when I consider what Ken Miles' death actually cost his family. As of 2026, no driver has ever won the 24 hours of Daytona, the 12 hours of Sebring, and the 24 hours of Le Mans in the same calendar year. Not Mario Andretti, not Jackie Stewart, not Niki Lauda, not Alain Prost, not Ayrton Senna, not Michael Schumacher, not Fernando Alonso, who won Le Mans in 2018 and 2019 and tried for years to complete the triple. Not any driver in the 60 years since Ken Miles stood on the edge of doing it. The Triple Crown of endurance racing in a single year remains the most elusive achievement in motorsport history, and the only man who ever had all three victories simultaneously within his grasp was a British tank commander from Birmingham who ran a struggling garage in North Hollywood and described driving as his hobby, like golfing. Ford's decision to orchestrate a photo finish at Le Mans in 1966 didn't just cost Ken Miles a race, it cost him a record that no one has equaled since. It cost him an achievement that, had he been allowed to take it, would have made his name as permanent a fixture in motorsport history as any driver who ever lived. That record is the Miles family's inheritance. Not a wrench. Not a Hall of Fame plaque that arrived 35 years late. Not a Hollywood film that took 53 years to get made. The empty column in the record books where Ken Miles' name should be. The achievement that belongs to a ghost because a corporate photo opportunity in France mattered more than sporting history. Mollie knew it. Peter knows it. And every driver who has since attempted the Triple Crown and fallen short has, whether they realized it or not, been chasing the shadow of a man who already did the hard part. He won Daytona. He won Sebring. He crossed the finish line at Le Mans first. History gave the trophy to someone else. But the record, the permanent and unrepeatable fact of what Ken Miles accomplished in 1966, that belongs to his family. And 60 years of no one else managing to do it is the most honest tribute the sport has ever paid him. Sometimes controversial, sometimes turbulent, but happy. Mollie Miles said that about her life with Ken. And I think it's the truest thing anyone connected to this story ever put into words. Because it wasn't a tragedy dressed up as a racing story. It was a life. A real, full, complicated, sometimes broke, occasionally dangerous, deeply loved life. And the family that came out the other side of Ford versus Ferrari deserved a better ending than the one history gave them. They're still waiting for someone to break that record, and so is the rest of us. If you want the real stories behind the films Hollywood left on the cutting room floor, this is where you'll find them. I'm Johnny, this is American Muscle, and I'll see you in the next one.